Oswald. Those of you on Zoom can go to their website at bookmiser.net for more information. That information also will be in the chat area of your screen. And now I'm inviting Annelle Gerson up to introduce our authors.
Good evening. It is invigorating to see so many people in this audience tonight. Thank you for being here. We know time is precious. There are a lot of places you could be, and you chose to be here. So we thank you for the privilege of your time. I promise you this is going to be an evening you long remember. So before introductions, I just want to acknowledge a couple of special people that are with us tonight. Kathy Bennett, put your hand, Kathy, founder of Magic Time Literary Publicity, and her husband, Roy, are with us this evening. Kathy is instrumental in bringing national authors like Hank to the Atlanta community. In Atlanta Authors and Book Miser, we are grateful to be working with Kathy, Roy, and the rest of their team toward our common goal of bringing authors and readers together. So thank you. And I have to say, I've done a lot of author introductions in my book selling career, and tonight's introductions were some of the hardest to write. When you have two amazing individuals with resumes that are deep and wide and long and impressive and impactful, it is difficult to compress it into a couple of paragraphs. And I'm going to give it a try. So here are some highlights. Our moderator this evening is legendary John Pruitt. John covered the news of Atlanta and Georgia as television anchor and reporter for half a century. His major stories include the assassination and funeral of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Jimmy Carter's rise from obscurity to become Georgia governor and president of the United States, 11 Democratic and Republican conventions, the 1983 bombing of a U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon, and the aftermath of the September 11th attack on the World Trade Center. Among his countless awards are 10 Emmys, including Best Male Anchor and Best Documentary, entry into the Georgia Association of Broadcasters Hall of Fame, the Atlanta Press Hall of Fame, the Georgia Winter Award for Public Service, and despite a clearly demanding career, he still managed to balance his time in life by earning Father of the Year. For decades, John Pruitt was Atlanta's Walter Cronkite, sitting behind his anchor desk, looking out at his audience and telling the truth. Since retiring, John has been busy writing. He released his first novel, Tell It True, in October of 2022, and I understand he may just be working on another. We hope so. Hank Phillipi Ryan is an on-air investigative reporter for Boston's WHDH-TV, earning 37 Emmys and dozens more journalism honors. She knows Atlanta well, as before moving on to Boston, she was an investigative reporter and weekend anchor for WSB-TV, where she and John worked together. Isn't life serendipitous? She is also the USA Today bestselling author of 14 psychological thrillers, winning the most prestigious awards in the genre. Specifically, she won the coveted Mary Higgins Clark Award, 5 Anthonys, 5 Agathas, and is the only author to win the Agatha in 4 categories: Best First, Best Novel, Best Short Story, Best Nonfiction. Are you not impressed? Tonight, we gather to celebrate her newest novel, the page-turning, standalone, The House Guest, a story of psychological manipulation that explores the dark heart of marriage and friendship. It's Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise. National book critics call her a superb and gifted storyteller. New York Times bestselling author Lisa Scottoline says Ryan is one of my favorite authors. Emmy-winning host Tamron Hall says, The House Guest kept me on the edge of my seat. Publishers Weekly's rave review says Ryan is a master of suspense, and Library Journal starred review calls it binge-worthy. Hank is a founder of Mystery Writers of America University, host of Prime Time on A Mighty Blaze, and co-host of First Chapter Fun in the Back Room. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome to Hank and John.
I'm just gonna take your picture. This is amazing, isn't it? Amazing?
Yeah, oh, look at that.
I
Well, there's a
know.
mirror in the back.
This is so fun. Okay. Everybody smile. Okay, I'll do a video. Everybody, so wait, just wait. Hey.
That's great. You're gonna post this? I'll steal your post. Well, while Hank is doing her due diligence for her massive publicity tour,
Yeah.
let me just welcome you back to Atlanta, Hank.
Thank you.
And before we begin, if I may take a personal privilege and say that I remember the day Hank Phillipi walked into the WSB newsroom in the late 70s,
76, 75, 76.
76, 75. It was very obvious to me that she was going to make a difference. She had those star qualities. She was a masterful communicator, both on the tube and on the printed page, or great writer. But the thing we all admired about Hank was her relentlessness as a reporter. She wouldn't take no for an answer. She was terrific in the political realm, which is a tough thing in Georgia because it's a very Byzantine world, but she jumped right into it and excelled at that. And also in the investigative area. I left to go to another station about a couple of years later, so I also had to compete against her. It's great to work with her, a little tough to compete against her. And then she goes to Boston, and the stardom that she was destined for really took hold. You may have noticed, I was hoping Annelle would mention my 10 Emmys at her 37. A little diminishing, but that's extraordinary. Hank has so many Emmys, 37, that there's no room on your bookshelves for books. It's all Emmys, is that right?
There's always room for books.
Okay.
And
kidding.
the two authors will tell you that, right? There's always room. For books,
Always.
always room. For books.
Yeah, they're stacked up horizontally and vertically. But Hank has done wonders in Boston. You have to be the most honored television journalist in the city of Boston. The 37 Emmys, not to mention the other honors she received for her tough investigative reporting. And as an investigative reporter, you have changed lives, you have changed laws, you have called out malfeasance on the part of politicians and companies. You have been a voice for those who have no voice, and you've made a huge difference, and that is widely respected and recognized newly. And the amazing thing is she still has her job in television while she's writing best-selling novels. Her first novel, Primetime, was based on your journalistic career. It was a winner from the get-go, award-winning, as have all of her 14 novels been. The USA Today bestseller. I mean, you're extraordinary. And, you know, I've worked with some great people over the years. I saw them when they were young. Tom Brokaw, who spent a stint at WSB, John Palmer. Jane Pauley came through the station at one time to audition, didn't get the job, but she did okay. I even had a young high school kid from Dunwoody come in to interview me on career day, Dunwoody High School, named Ryan Seacrest. I never remembered his name, but he reminded me years later. But in that group of luminaries, you certainly are right up there with them. And it's great to see you here.
Well, it's really
Congratulate you on all your successes.
Thank you. Thank you. When I was telling someone in Boston where I would be tonight, I said, I really hope I can get through this without crying. Because like I said, this person is going to talk to me, and he is the most iconic, revered reporter and anchor person that Atlanta has ever known. And I said, he's like, just as you said, he's just Walter Cronkite of Atlanta. And to come in as a really newbie reporter and have this person be a mentor and a guide and a rock. And if you ever needed an answer to a journalism question, he knew it. You're reliable, you're honorable and benevolent and honest and fabulous. And so the idea that hey Zoom people, the idea that we are together now here with books after what, 40 years is so incredible that even in our writer imaginations, we could never have come up with that. We never could have come up with that. You are here for this thing that is extraordinary. And I never would have thought it. So thank you. I'm really grateful for this.
So I think the format is going to be, I'm going to ask Hank a few questions, and then we're going to open it up to you, because I'm sure you all would like to ask questions of Hank or me. So let's begin. And I'll begin with, I guess, what is the obvious question, because I'm a journalist, you're a journalist. And when I sat down to write my novel, Tell It True, my first novel, I had to shake some of the journalism. Journalism, as you know, writing for television in particular, it has to be concise, simple, understandable. You don't want to use multi-syllable adjectives because that would get thrown out. And writing a novel, writing fiction, was like being able to color outside the lines, finally, being able to make stuff up, which we could never do as part of a newscast. So I'm curious how your journalistic background factored into your writing, because I know that it had an impact, but how did you deal with that?
I could never, what a great question, as always, right? I could never have written novels without having had 30 some years at the time when I started writing. I started writing fiction when I was 55. So that was what, 17 years ago. I never could have written fiction without having been a journalist. And if you think about it, what is the best thing that you could ever say to a reporter? Oh, that's a great story. Jennifer knows this. Well, that's a great story. I've always loved telling a great story. And when you think about what you need in a story for television, you need a character who you care about. You need a big problem that needs to be solved, or else everything else will fall apart. You have to track down clues and follow leads and do research and do interviews. And in the end, you hope the good guys win and the bad guys get what's coming to them. And you get some justice and you change the world a little bit. And that is exactly the same, whether it's investigative reporting or whether it's writing psychological fiction. Those story elements are the same. Also, I don't want you to turn the channel when my stories are on TV, right? When you're on, we want you to watch you, right? And I don't want you to be able to put my books down. I want you to say, oh, just one more chapter. You know, I want you to miss your stop on Marta because you just can't, you know, you've got to turn one more page. So that propulsiveness too, it has to be compelling, it has to be riveting, it has to be important, it has to be interesting, it has to be new, right? New, because if what we were writing somebody else had already written, it would be old, right? It'd be old, it's not news. So those kinds of elements are really the same. So I just turn on my storytelling brain and see what happens next.
I found it liberating because I like to call it the cerulean theory. Cerulean blue. If I had written that in a news story, it never would have made the cut. But I could use cerulean and tell it. That's just an example of the liberating aspect of it. But you're absolutely right. The journalistic impulses do feed the narrative of the fictional work, and I think.
I mean, it's interesting because I don't have an outline at all for my stories.
Well, that was my next question.
Well, see, they're just in so sync because it follows so perfectly. Well, you ask it.
Well, because The House Guest, which is a fantastic novel and one that actually made me miss my Marta train. It's complex. It has so many interlocking pieces. It has twists and turns. And so I'm visualizing Hank with a big wall board and a million Post-it notes and flowcharts trying to organize this plot before you write the first chapter. Is that the way you do it, or is it laissez-faire?
I have a big wall board. It is blank. It is blank. I don't really even have a big wall board. It's interesting because no, I don't have an outline at all. I have no idea what's going to happen in my novels until I write the next word and the next sentence and the next paragraph and the next scene. I don't know. And I know that sounds strange, but again, we go back to reporting. If I'm an investigative reporter, I don't know how the story ends. I have no idea. I'm gonna go investigate and search it out. I'm in search of the story. And so every day when I sit at my computer looking out at the sugar maple tree, I'm in search of the story. And so I'm not afraid of when I type the words chapter 1 and then I think, okay, 100,000 words to go. I'm not afraid of that because that's what I've done for the past 43 years, is not know the ending. I'm in search of the story. I just see what happens. And every day I think, oh, I can't wait to see what happens next. And I know that I won't know until I write it. And that's what gets me to the computer every day.
I do understand that. I've only written one novel. And there are a number of novelists here in the audience. And I think we all share that experience of creating characters and then letting them lead us through the story. And it's hard to explain to a non-writer.
Well, yeah, although Sue Grafton used to call it the magic. It's the magic that we as human beings are the only creatures who can make something out of nothing, right? We can create new worlds and new people and new characters that never existed before, out of nothing but our own creativity, out of nothing but our own imagination, out of nothing but our own passion and desire. And that's special. That is special. And that is the magic. So one of the things I worried about when I started writing, just exactly as you said, was whether I could make stuff up. After all these years of the setting is the setting, the dialogue is the dialogue, the truth is the truth. I get to look for a bigger truth now. I get to look for a more profound truth and be able to share that truth in a way that I want you to understand rather than how it really is in the real world.
I've heard you say, Hank, that you read the last page of a novel first, which strikes me as really strange. Is that true? And would you recommend that everyone here who reads the house does read the last page?
That's a good question. Okay, so I need to explain this to you first, and probably most important. No, do not read the end of any of our books first. But if you did, you still wouldn't know what really happened. You'd get the sort of emotional coda ending of the book, and it might bring tears to your eyes, as it always does to mine, but you really wouldn't know what happened. You wouldn't know about the mystery. But I don't like to be surprised. So I read the last page, I read the first chapter, then I read the last page sort of to see who's still alive. and then the stress of reading suspense is gone, which I love. The other thing about reading the last page first is, as an author, it's really educational, because if I know essentially what happens in the end, I can take the beginning of the book and see how the author did it. It's a sort of research technical kind of thing. So every clue that the author drops, I pick up because I know what the end is. And we work so hard, don't we, on our novels to have foreshadowing and clues, and everything happens because of something. The motivation has to all make sense. So in the end, we're looking for someone to say, wow, what a great book. It ended perfectly. I never saw that coming, but I should. That's what we're going for. So I'm reading. That's one of the bad things. I'm sure you know this about being an author, is that you read books differently. You can't just read them for fun. I'm either thinking, wow, this is so good, I'm not going to write anymore because this book is much better than mine. Or I think, this is kind of bad. Sorry, people, this is kind of bad. How did this get published? Or I think, I would have cut that. I would have cut that right out. So it's reading a book for me is a different deal. Is it for you now?
It is. But it's a growing process. I've only written one novel, so it's a learning process. I was taken by listen to one of your TED Talks, and you talked about how you wrote your first novel, which was Prime Time, and how you had the idea. And the key word here is spam, in case you don't remember.
No, I know, I totally remember. I mean, it's interesting because one of the great questions about novel writing, especially suspense and psychological suspense and domestic suspense, like as I write, is what is first? You know, what comes first, a character or a setting or a plot? And I think that those are all, you know, they all have to sort of come at the same time. And what comes first to me is really just one cool idea. And we should talk about that for the house guest as well, because that's a cool idea. But for my first book, I was at work at Channel 7. And back in the day, this was 2005, maybe 2004. And I was deleting all the spam from my email, because remember back in the day when the spam filters weren't as good as they are now, and you had every morning, you just had to clear out the spam and then start. And I opened one by mistake, and it said, the subject line said, "A new refinancing deal for you." And then in the body of the email, it had what looked like lines from a Shakespearean play. And much to my parents' chagrin, I was a Shakespeare major in college, so I knew it wasn't. They're like, "Oh, honey, you're unemployable." You know? Anyway, I knew it wasn't Shakespeare, but it was like that. It was that ilk. And I thought, why would someone send spam to like millions of people that some people would delete and other people would open? Why would someone send spam that said a new refinancing deal for you, and then have obviously dialogue from a play? And my brain said to me, writers will get this, my brain said to me, maybe it's a secret message. I mean, I thought, you know how when you have a good idea, I just thought that's a great idea. That's a great idea. I'm going to write a novel. And I'll tell you, I went home to my husband and said, "Sweetheart, I have a great idea for a novel. I'm going to write a mystery." And Jonathan says, "Great." And he says, "Do you know how to write a novel?" I mean, he's very supportive, but this is out of the clear blue. And so I said, I remember this so well. I said, "How hard can it be?" I've read a million novels, and I soon learned how hard it could be. But that became prime time. That was my first novel.
And it was a success right out of the gate. And it's hard, but you have managed to be so prolific. The House Guest is number 14. You've got another one about to be unleashed into the literary world. So you are working hard, but you're producing a lot. I'm ready, I think, to turn this over to a crowd of interested people who I'm sure have questions about Hank and The House Guest, which is a fantastic novel. And I love the character of Alyssa, but I can't really decide how I feel about her.
Yeah,
Maybe those who
I
have read
love
the
that.
novel.
I love that. Well, I'll tell you really quickly, just a little bit about The House Guest for 2 seconds, and then I do want to take all of your questions. We want easy, non-controversial questions. It's interesting. There was a thing on Twitter that said, "Can you describe your book in 5 words?" So I thought, 5 words. Okay, yes, I can do that in 5 words. So 5 words for The House Guest are greed, betrayal, divorce, guilt, and revenge. Greed, betrayal, divorce, guilt, and revenge. And then 5 on Facebook, they let you have 5 phrases because there are more characters on it. So 5 phrases for The House Guest are: a beautiful house on Cape Cod, a shocking and disturbing divorce, an unusually sympathetic FBI agent, a brand new best friend, and an emerald necklace. And that's The House Guest. So quickly, The House Guest, as you say, stars Alyssa McAllen, who, let me ask you this, have any of you ever been, and you don't have to raise your hand because you know it's public, but have any of you ever been heartbroken, unhappy, felt that you had the rug pulled out from under you, ever felt that everything you ever thought was true and good in your life is just wrong and it's not what you thought it was? And that's when we meet Alyssa. She's in this state of disequilibrium. She's unhappy, she's bereft because her husband of 8 years has walked out on her inexplicably. She has no idea why. He won't tell her why. She thought they were happy, the powerful, handsome, wonderful Bill McGowan, who she loves and who she thought loved him. Not only has he walked out without explaining why, but he seems to be trying to ruin her life. He's taken all the friends have gone with Bill. He's trying to take all of their money. He's trying to take their house and leave her with absolutely nothing. And when the FBI shows up at her house, she realizes that she really needs a friend. and then she gets one. A sort of beguiling, seductive new friend named Bree Lawrence, who seems to be running from a dangerous man of her own. And the two women become fast friends, as women sometimes do. And Bree makes an offer that maybe she and Alyssa can solve each other's problems. So you heard Gaslight meets Thelma and Louise, meets Strangers on a Train. But remember that the author might be gaslighting you too. So very, very quickly. Very, very quickly. The house guest is two strong women facing off in a high-stakes psychological cat and mouse game to prove their truth about a devastating betrayal. But which woman is the cat, and which woman is the mouse, and which woman is the house guest? And that's essentially it.
That's great. I would recommend it. It's a great read. In fact, I was preparing to do this program, and there was a squib on Facebook promoting it. And my daughters, both of whom are in their late 40s, just went ballistic. They said, we just read that. And they loved it. So hopefully they'll.
Before we take audience questions.
Yes.
Can you just tell us about Tell It True?
Oh, I'd be more than happy to do that. It's a little different genre from your genre. It's a historical fiction, and it is based upon my reporting experiences in the 60s, beginning in '64, which was my first year in television news, covering the civil rights turmoil at the time. And it is based on fact, but it's fictional. And it really is based on the murder of Lemuel Penn, who was a retired African-American lieutenant colonel, who was murdered by Klansmen north of Athens, Georgia, as he was driving home from his reserve duty as an Army officer at Fort Benning. He was a decorated war hero, gunned down in the middle of the night by Klansmen. But I took the crime and created a novel based on the crime, because with a novel and historical fiction, you can consolidate the plot, you can let the characters carry out the actions you need them to carry out and say the things you need them to say. So it's basically a story of the South in 1964. The racial turmoil as the Civil Rights Act of '64 was just signed into law in July of '64, which happened to be my first week on the job. The violence that permeated the South in those days, the horrible discrimination, the unwillingness of so much of the South to accept the Civil Rights Act, and the effort by those who realized to be on the right side of history, the South was going to have to change. And the efforts they made to help that change along, both politically, in the business community, in the civil rights community, the law enforcement community. It's a rather complex plot, many characters, a lot of moving parts. But for those of you who would like to know something about Georgia history in 1964, in what I think is an entertaining, fast-moving way, I think Tell It True will give you a very good picture of what that time was like.
I mean, you say complex, but it's seamless and gorgeous and riveting and pivotal, and it's such an important novel. And it brings tears to my eyes too that you named it Tell It True. Why is that?
It took me a while to come to a title. It was always part of the list of titles, but the more I eliminated, the more I realized that Tell It True, which no one else had named the book as, but that's changed actually. There's another Tell It True out there, but it's young adult genre, so it's not competing with me. As journalists, we tell it true, but throughout the book, various characters will use the term tell it true. It might be a segregationist yelling at the racist candidate for governor saying, tell it true, Roscoe, tell it true. It might be the congregation of the civil rights leader, who's a minister in Atlanta, all-black church, preaching about civil rights and equality. And they're saying, tell it true, brother, tell it true. And of course, the journalists themselves, and they're a major part of this novel. Back in the days of film, I think that was even before your time.
No.
All they had to go through to get stories on the air and to process the film. If they were out of the field, out in the boondocks, in the fictional Pike County, where the murder takes place in my novel, they're in hostile territory, and yet they have to shoot the story, sometimes at great personal risk, get it back to the station, get it on the air. Nothing instantaneous like today. When it happens, you see it almost immediately. No, it took 2 to 3 hours. And a huge pressure on the news media to tell it true. And to tell it true was shocking in and of itself, the violence that took place. So the Tell It True title really raises the question, what is the truth? Where do you find the truth? Who is telling the truth? And I think that that has real implications for our society today.
Oh, absolutely so. I mean, when you were going to ask me where I got the idea for the house guest, I hope you will. But let me just go back to John for one more second, and that is, I interviewed David McCullough once, the historian David McCullough. I know, he's amazing. And I said to him, Mr. McCullough, do you have a theme for every book you write? And he said, yes, I have a theme for every book I write, and I write the book to find out what it is. and I think that's so powerful. Yes, and I do think that both of us have themes. The theme of the house guest is female empowerment and justice and truth. And I think we both work for justice and truth as journalists and as authors as well. I mean, it's a very powerful emotion and a very powerful theme. Every novel of suspense is interesting and entertaining, and it's a good story. But if a book is big and good, there's more to it. There's more that will stick with you than just the plot. And I work really hard to do that, and I know you do too.
Your book was very thought-provoking, and I hope mine is thought-provoking as well in terms of how we as a society deal with these massive shifts in ideas and changes. And the Civil Rights Revolution was, of course, the biggest thing that happened in the country since the Civil War. And remarkably, it was amazingly successful. We have not reached the beloved community that Dr. King talked about, but two steps forward, one step back, we're getting there. And I do have an uplifting ending to my story, even though some of it's pretty dark and tough to read. I invite you all to read. And house guests as well.
No pressure, it's just our career.
Well, yes, more so yours than mine. Let's open it up to questions. I know a number of you have probably read The House Guest. Maybe some of you have read Tell It True. We would love to respond to any questions you have.
We won't give any spoilers. Yes.
Yes.
What was the inspiration for the house?
Oh, what a good idea.
Plant that question.
Nice. I just beat them over the head. Yeah, and yes, where did I get the idea for the house guest? Good idea. We'll do that for the next questions too. Thank you. I was talking earlier about how people say to me, do you have a whole list of story ideas for your novels? And I say, I have a file in my email that says book ideas. And when I needed an idea for this book, I opened the file and there was nothing in it. So that's the problem with writing a novel. But I remember that years ago, in another lifetime, I had a friend who was, worldly, successful, happily married woman, professional and reliable and, hotshot. And she was married to a professional, reliable, hotshot husband. And every morning they'd have breakfast together and she'd say, "Bye, honey, I'm going off to the office." And he'd say, "Okay, honey, have a good day. I'm going off to the office too." And that went on for many years until after about 6 or 7 years, the police arrived at their front door. And it turned out that the husband had never gone to work a day in his life. Never. The job was made up. The whole thing was pretend. And he had actually, my book is not about this, but he had actually been home trading in child pornography on the computer. And my friend didn't know. That's the key. My friend didn't know. So I thought, we see these stories, the Madoffs before, and now the Gilgo Beach murders, where the wife of the alleged serial killer says she was out of town, she had no idea, and we think, come on, you're not paying attention if you don't see this. But I'm telling you that my friend didn't know, and in all the research I did about this, spouses rarely know what their nefarious spouse is doing. So I had this in my head, and so timely because of Gilgo Beach now. I looked at my husband when she said that, and I said, "See, this is my book." Anyway, in the pandemic, my husband, who's a criminal defense and civil rights attorney, had commandeered the breakfast room for his law office. And 2 rooms away, I was writing in my study. And I was thinking about this, and I thought, what's he really doing in there? and we talk about his cases all the time, but he's in there for 8 hours. And what is that? And then I started thinking, he doesn't really know what I'm doing either. You know, 2 rooms away, he thinks I'm writing crime fiction. Who knows? So then I started thinking, what if could Jonathan be keeping a really dark secret from me? Could he do it? And then I thought, no, I would know. But then I thought, could I keep a secret from him? And I thought, sure. Of course I could. And you think I could too, right? So then I started thinking, how well do we really know that person who's on the pillow next to us? How well do we really know that person who we think we love and trust? And that was the germ of the house guest. And you see that now. It's not about that, but it's about that.
Yeah, it's a thrill ride. Any other questions? Back of the room, please speak up and I'll repeat your question.
Oh, I can speak up.
Okay.
I have some Zoom questions from people. One was, I understand the notion of telling a great story, yet I wrestle with going from nonfiction and journalism and its tell to fiction and the showing. Suggestions on that transition?
I'm not sure I totally understood the question, but
I think she means, I assume, that she means that maybe she writes in a journalism method now. How do you go to fiction?
well, as I had mentioned earlier, when you're writing for television newscasts, the writing has to be crisp, succinct, interesting, not complex. It has to be understood by a wide range of folks from all walks of life, educational levels, and short. And fiction is quite different. So I'm not sure my transition was quite as easy as yours, because as I indicated, I found it liberating to be able to just write long sentences and paragraphs and use the big adjectives. It was not a difficult transition for me. I suspect in looking at Tell It True, I see some journalese in there in terms of sentences, and in my next novel, I'll probably try to make it a little smoother. I do see that. I was giving a lot of facts, and maybe I would back off and not maybe give as many facts next time. I don't know. But
I think the difference in writing for journalism, and I think one of the things that you can do for transition is to think about that you're not reporting on something. You're telling a story about something that really happened. Although the people that you're telling the story about are fictional, their world is as true and real as the real world. So you have a character who really wants something, and you ask yourself, how far would they go to get that thing? So your truth is in the character's head. Your truth is in the point of view of the character. And you use that character to get into their world and see the people that they meet, knowing that everyone in their world wants something too. And how far will they go to get that thing? And what happens when those two wants, that your character wants and the other character wants, when those two wants collide, what happens and what will happen next, and what will someone do, and what will evolve from that? So it's a step-by-step story that you're creating. And I think about it like almost a fairy tale. You know, if someone says to you, once upon a time, right? And the walls fall away and you're in a different world. That's what you're writing in fiction. You're creating a new world. And, I think about people saying to me, I don't know how I feel about Alyssa. What about Bree and the handsome Des Russo and the mysterious Hattie Parker, the FBI agent? And what is really going on with Bill? And I say to people, I made those people up. I made them up, but it feels real to you. They feel like real people to you. And I think that's the key. In journalism, you're writing about real people, and it makes sense what they do. And in fiction, you're writing about real people, real fictional people, and it's all about motivation and desire and conflict. And I think that's the story.
I'll add this: when writing historical fiction, my objective was not only to entertain and write something that would be very readable and interesting, but also to teach. I mean, it's an effort by me to teach, to pass on my experiences through the characters that I covered and I feel like I knew. They're all composites of people I knew. But that's an element of historical fiction that you feel like you're teaching as well as writing. And the key is to make it entertaining.
And you're teaching about not only history, but about the world and about how people behave and how people thought. I mean,
Yes.
my book, Her Perfect Life, which is about television, the idea for that came from right here in Atlanta. I will tell you that I was anchoring the weekend news one Saturday night, and I came home and I turned up. I lived in Anza Park, in Virginia, Virginian Highland, in Virginia.
Yeah.
And I came home and there were police cars on my block, like swirling blue lights, police cars. So I thought, oh, this is going to be a good story. So I drive closer to the police cars, and I realized that the police cars are in front of my house. They're in front of my house. So I leap out of the car, and I, grab the first officer who I see. It's midnight. It's after midnight on Saturday night. Grab the first officer I see, and I say, I'm Hank Phillipi. And he says, yeah, I know who you are. And I said, that's my house. And he said, yeah, I know. And I said, what happened? And he said, someone broke into your house. This is way before Ring and anything like that. This is like Dog or nothing. Somebody broke into your house, and we caught him. He's in the cruiser back over there. And I said, okay. And he said, do you know why he broke into your house? And I said, no. And he said, because he knew you were live on TV. So he knew you were not home. So he knew where you were, and he knew where you could not be. And he knew that there was a span of time that you could not come home. And that was a real moment when I thought, oh my golly, I'm so vulnerable. We're all so vulnerable. We're out on live shots. You know where I am. The parking lot of the television station. And I thought about that from the standpoint of a novel many years later. I thought, we choose to be in the public spotlight. We want, I want you to know who we are. We want you to know who we are. But what about our kids? They don't choose to be in the spotlight. They didn't choose that life of being in the spotlight. And that's what Her Perfect Life is about, balancing that reality of celebrity, sort of celebrity, with the vulnerability and open and access that people have to the good part and the bad part.
Other questions? Yes.
So, Hank Phillipi, you said that when you start writing, you don't know what's going to happen next. So, as you're writing, like, how much of that do you end up trashing, or someone reads it and do you take their advice?
Oh, that's such a good question. Nobody sees my books until I'm finished. So with the first draft, nobody sees them. Because after all these years as a reporter, forgive me, Jen, when the executive producer looks at my script and the news director looks at my script and my producer looks at my script and they say, I have Ida Powell who said, anybody who can change something that you write will change it. And so I just don't care what anybody thinks right now. I just don't care. I'm writing it for me. And yes, the story starts coming out, and the characters have intent, and the characters have desire, and the characters have passion. All of them do. And then the conflict begins, and the scariness begins, and the psychological suspense begins. And as I write the story, I start seeing what's going to happen. And I know this sounds strange, but about 3/4 of the way through, I always have this moment where I think, oh, that's what this is. Okay, I got this. I don't really have it, but at that point I have this moment of like, maybe this is going to work. And then I just finish. I have a little yellow sticky on my computer that says, advance the story. So I just keep going, I keep going. And then when I'm finished with the first draft, and it's terrible. There are days that I write sentences and I think, that is the worst thing that anybody's ever written, the worst sentence that's ever existed on the planet. And I think, yep, now write another bad sentence because you can fix it later. So then in editing, I just take out everything that isn't the story. So of course I've started you'll see things that are artifacts and don't mean anything anymore, or things I thought would matter and they don't matter anymore, but I don't care, I don't fix them on my first draft, I do the whole thing. Find the story, I'm in search of the story, I find the story, then I make it as good as it can possibly be, fast moving. I mean, if you like Lisa Jewell, Lisa Scottolini, Lisa Unger, all the Lisas, that's sort of that's what my books are like. It's interesting too, because Harlan Coben once told me to write the kind of book you love to read. Because if you're writing a book that you would love to read, then the readers, that passion comes through on the page. So I don't like graphic sex in novels, so I just don't put it in. I don't like graphic violence in novels, I just don't put it in. I don't like inappropriate language in novels, so I just don't put it in. But I do like deception and mystery and twists and gaslighting and mind games and a little bit of murder. So that's sort of the Hank DNA.
You know, I really noticed that about the house guests, lack of profanity, lack of graphic sex or violence. And I really respect that, because I tried to do the same thing and tell it true. I used a couple of profane expressions, but it's very mild by today's
Yeah,
standards.
different deal.
Because I wanted my grandchildren to read the book, and I didn't want to. And one particular conundrum I had was use of the N-word, because if I were to be absolutely true to the dialogue and colloquialisms of 1964 Georgia, honesty would compel me to use it. And in the initial drafts I did, and I had some very good writer friends who said, you don't want to do that. And they were absolutely right, because I never felt right about it, and you don't need to do it.
You can write around it, everybody knows.
You don't need to do it. There are a couple of racial epithets, but I did not use
It's
that
historical
particular
fiction,
one.
and that's important. That's a balance. That's really hard to do, because you're telling it true in a way that you want people to read it.
But so much of today's fiction is so obscene and so graphic, and it becomes a turnoff for me.
Well, that's why there's a book for everyone. There's
Yeah.
just a book for everyone. Some people like some things, some people like other things, and if you don't like a book, just you'll like these.
I respect the way you did it.
My husband reads before we go to sleep every night. My husband reads, and I'll say, "How's your book, honey?" And he'll say, I don't think it's good." And I say, "Well, how far have you read?" And he'll say, 100 pages. And I say, that's gone. And I said, "I'm going to take that book and hide it. And the next day you won't find it. I'm just going to put another one there." So do you read books that you don't love? Do you just persevere? You do.
I'll finish the book. I'll finish the book even if I don't love it. I keep hoping.
I think there's just two schools of thought about that. I see you said that you just persevere. My husband says it's a contract that he's made with the reader.
Certainly the writer would appreciate that.
So hey, how many pages should one read before?
Have you heard the thing about it's your age? Do you know this? Someone said to me, you figure out your age, decide what you want to be that day, and read that many pages. And if you don't fall in love with the book after 32, 45, 76 pages, then you're done. And it's fine, because you should be in love with the book when you read it. You should be in love with it.
I need at least 100 pages for those of you who pick up television. It takes me that long to set the scene. Other questions? I'm not sure how long we should go.
Yes,
Danelle, you'll give me the high sign next time.
You said that you write by the seat of your pants. Do you write from beginning to end, or do you write random scenes and then kind of assemble the book at the end?
I'll take that
And
one.
after the first draft, do you add scenes in chapter?
Yeah, perfect question. Are you writing? Because that sounds like a writer question. Okay. Everybody does it a different way, and everybody's way is fine. So the way that works for you, that's great. You just hang on to that way. The way that works for me is I write straight through. Even if I have 2 different points of view or 3 different points of view, I write straight through. Then when the book is done, I think, maybe I need another bit from this person. Or I sometimes expand and I sometimes contract. Often I'll take out a lot of the beginning to make the end be richer. But I just do it like life. I just do it like life is how I do it. Diana Gabaldon, who wrote Outlander, do you watch and see Outlander? She writes her, yay in the back, she writes just a random scene. She doesn't even know what the book is about. And then she writes another random scene and she gives them colors. Like I wrote a magenta scene and then I wrote a turquoise scene. And then when she finally writes enough of them, she says at some point, her mind sees the book and sees where they all go. I know. So it's just, I just say that because it's proof that anybody can do it any way that feels good. Do you know Gone Girl, the book Gone
Yes.
Girl by Gillian Flynn? And you know, I'm not gonna tell the end of it, but you know, part of the deal of it is a diary. And in the first draft of Gone Girl, there was no diary. Can you imagine? That's what it is. And apparently Gillian Flynn's editor said to her, didn't you write like a character study for this character? And she said, yes. And she said, why don't you put that in like a diary? She said, okay. And so the world changed as a result of that. So one of the things I learned in television and one of the things I learned in editing is that an editor might have a good idea and I could be wrong. And so if someone else has a good idea, I completely embrace it. I'm like, thank you. I'm like right in there. So it's all how you want to do it. So what's comfortable for you is the way.
At this stage of your career, do you have an editor who you trust, who works with you, who knows you, is your go-to person for this sort of thing?
Well, I have an editor at Forge, Kristen Sevick, who is a genius. I mean, she is a genius. She's wonderful. And I've worked with her on 9 books. And she sees the book on the day that it's due. Probably 6 o'clock on the day that it's due, unless I decided. One day I said to her, I'm in California, so I have 3 more hours until 6 o'clock. But I wasn't. But I trust her with this. I make the first draft, which is, the best first draft it could be. So I worked for a year on this draft, worked for a year. I sent it to Kristen and I say, okay, I can't wait for this book to be Kristenized because she always has the thing. She always has the thing. My book, The Wrong Girl, she emailed me back and she said, I love this book. It's all about redemption. And I'm like, yeah, I totally meant it to be about redemption. So then, but then in the rewrite, then I can go back and make it be about redemption. She obviously saw something in the book that I didn't, and that's the genius of an editor. I don't show it to anybody else, though. I don't have anybody else that I show it to, as I said along the way, because I don't care.
Really? I
Do you?
I did. I'm a first-time novelist.
Yeah.
And I needed feedback. And some of these people, Steve Oning, Steve.
He's a genius.
He's a genius and wrote the definitive work on the Leo Frank lynching and The Dead Shall Rise. And he's a good friend out in LA, but he's a Georgia graduate. And he was my cheerleader. He realized initially, right on, he said, you've got something here, go with it. And he had great suggestions, make your characters quirkier, that sort of thing.
Well, he's a brilliant writer in every way.
He's a brilliant writer.
Brilliant with structure and brilliant with character and brilliant.
And he's got one coming out. He's still working on a history of public radio. It's going to be great. And NPR. Phillipi Williams, also a very distinguished novelist, had some great thoughts for me. And there were others, but yeah, I needed to get some validation of what I was doing.
At the beginning.
I even emailed, I don't know. I was about halfway through, I emailed my old buddy Hank, and you had some great suggestions.
Good.
I didn't send you the copy because I had been reluctant.
Well, I
to do
always
that.
would love to see it, and you're gonna send me the next one.
I will.
Hurry up and write faster.
Yes, I've got a shrinking horizon.
Yes.
John, let's go ahead and do one more Zoom question because it's getting about to be 7. So
Okay.
we'll wrap it up.
Oh, time is flown.
Yeah, we're not 100% sure what the backstory is for this, but the question is, please talk about the back room.
You may have your own back room. I don't even know if I want to know about that. The back room is, do you know Karen Dion, who wrote The Marsh King's Daughter? Karen Dion and I had a Zoom event together early on in the pandemic. And we realized that we weren't seeing the audience at all. It was before everybody got sort of savvy about Zoom and you could see people. We were just, as I said to Karen, we were just putting on makeup and talking to machines. You know, we weren't seeing any people. So we came up with this idea of having a bi-monthly author panel where 4 authors would answer, you know, quick, like 20 questions. What's your favorite pet? Do you use a pen or a pencil? Are you pizza or chocolate? Those kinds of fun questions. And then go into breakout rooms with 25 or 30 people. You were on it.
I was.
Yeah, we had you on last time. 25 or 30 attendees is the word I'm searching for so unsuccessfully. And every attendee gets to have 15 minutes in a group of 25 with each author. So you really get to meet them and they really get to see you, and it's up to, you know, the readers ask the questions. And we've been doing it for 3 years now. And it's amazing that there's one this Sunday that has Kathy Reichs, Don Bentley, Tosca Lee, and Polly Stewart. I mean, that's the level of people, and John. We had John. So that's the level of people we have in the back room. So it's free. It's Sunday nights at 7. Go to the-back-room.org, the world's worst URL. And you can just find me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and you'll see the login for it. It's great, not to be missed. Thank you, whoever asked that question.
I'm amazed at all you do. It's just incredible, your energy level. You are writing novels, you are around the country, you are doing back room.
My poor husband eats a lot of carry-out salmon, I gotta say.
Do we have time for another question now?
Yes.
Oh,
One more. Let's do
one more question, if there is one. Yes, George. I love those, Kathy Bennett. Did you have a question, Kathy?
She does, she wants to ask.
Will you tell us about your next book coming out February 6th?
Like a true publicist, right?
Kathy is my guide and mentor through book tour world. And she just asked me, will you tell us about your new book that comes out February 6th, One Wrong Word? Yes, I will tell you about One Wrong Word. Quickly, February 6th, One Wrong Word is about a crisis management expert, Arden Ward, who has to solve a crisis of her own, who has to manage a crisis in her own life. She's savvy and smart and successful, but she's accused of having an affair with the client, which she would never do, will never, has never, not even crossed her mind. But her reputation is about to be ruined. So she spends her life helping other people and guiding them through the crises in their lives. Now she has a crisis of her own. So she has to figure out how to save her own reputation and her own career and her own life. And it may be in the end that she has to do it by protecting a murderer. So we'll see.
So, Kathy, you'll be booking Roswell Cultural Arts Center.
And it came from an event in my real life. And I'm not going to tell you what that is until I come back to it.
I was gonna say, will you ever tell us?
We will eagerly await that.
Are you wrapping us up?
Yeah.
John, it's just amazing. It's amazing. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I was gonna ask for a big round of applause, but
Oh,
I
yes, yes.
do it again. Authors will be in the lobby. We've got copies. Annelle, the book miser, has copies of their books, and y'all will be signing out in the lobby, so y'all can buy their books.
Let me tell you what my agent always tells me to say. A signed book makes a great gift. Thank you. Get on our mailing list, find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook, find me on Twitter. Please stay in touch. Come to my website, phillipiryan.com. Click on contact, comes right to me, sign up for my newsletter.
Okay, we have 2 more announcements to make.
Just a couple. The next Atlanta authors will be in November. On Veterans Day, November 11th, it will be here. We have Ronna Simmons, who has written a couple of books about one historical fiction and one nonfiction about veterans of World War II. And then Roswell Reeds has two big events. Tracy Anderson, can't remember her last name. She'll be here September 12th, again, here in this room. And then September 29th, which is a Friday, we have William Kent Kruger. His new book is The River We Remember, and that will be here in the big auditorium, $20 for a ticket. There'll also be a writing workshop the next morning at the Roswell Adult Rec Center, $13.50 is the charge for that. The new book is available, well, you can pre-order at Book Miser. The first 100 copies of the registrants who pre-order a book will get special seating prior, good seating at the event. The library, Fulton County Library, also has the book on order. You can put the book on hold once it's on order. So,
Have you heard William Kent Kruger ever? Have you ever heard him? He's one of the best, most powerful speakers I've ever heard. And his books are so brilliant, they will make you cry. So don't miss them. Don't think he's
two of the books, The Ordinary Grace and This Tender Land, are standalone books, as is this new one. So thank you all again. Please join us for our upcoming events. Keep on having them.